Hello and welcome to the Stronghold Digital Mining Daily Update. Today's Monday, September 18th, 2023. So what I'm focused on this week is to see if there's going to be a regulatory filing in the form of a Form 8K filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission by Stronghold Digital Mining that might include the contents of any slide presentation that might have been made at the recent 25th Annual H.C. Wainwright Global Investor Conference. So, as we've previously discussed, Stronghold Digital Mining participated in this investment conference. So, I think we can perhaps glean some interesting insights and perspectives as to what our co-chairman and chief executive officer, Greg Beard, and our chief financial officer, Matt Smith, what they might be thinking about as it relates to the type of conversation, the type of presentation that they'd have with institutional investors. And so this potential slide deck might give us some insight into that. So that's something we're going to be focused on, watching to see if there happens to be any regulatory filing with regard to that this week. Something else that I continue to monitor and that I think we're all very, very interested in finding out more information about is where we are ultimately going to, house or find a home for, right? The 25 megawatts of end-to-end data center equipment that Stronghold Digital Mining owns, which you can pretty much get just about, say, like 1 exahash of additional Bitcoin mining equipment in that data center infrastructure, right? So, we need to find a place to put this data center, equipment so that it can be energized with electricity. And then, of course, we'll need to figure out how to fill it with Bitcoin mining machines. Given what I'm noticing insofar as hash prices, I recognize and acknowledge that hash prices, they go up, they go down. Right now, we're very much on a down cycle. So if the past is any guide, which of course we're oftentimes admonished not to treat the past as a predictor of the future, but hey, let's kind of keep it somewhat constructive and somewhat reasonable. Hey, to the extent we eventually do see an uplift in hash prices, then obviously, right, we're going to be meaning Stronghold Digital Mining is going to be a huge beneficiary of that, even just with 4 exahash of Bitcoin mining equipment. But to have that extra, say roughly exahash of Bitcoin mining equipment actually installed and powering, helping to validate transactions on the Bitcoin network and receiving block rewards as a result of doing so, that's going to definitely help our overall economic picture. But given where hash prices are right now, and given the fact that we don't really know, like at what point next year, if at all, will we see hash prices improve? So I would gather, my intuition tells me that we really need to be thinking about finding, the absolute lowest cost of electricity possible. So it's going to be interesting to see where we ultimately place that equipment. It is not lost upon me that, we were kind of guiding towards about 130 megawatts of basically like electrical usage as it relates to our Bitcoin mining operations. Okay, and that would have been by basically the end of September, right, of this year, right? So September 30th, 2023. Now we reached the 4 exahash milestone well before then, which is phenomenal. That's great execution on the part of really everybody at the company. So that would suggest that we're utilizing 130 megawatts of electricity, right? Now, we already know that between Panther Creek and Scrubgrass, we have basically nameplate capacity, right? Nameplate electrical generation capacity of about 165 megawatts. So the question then arises, is it plausible? I mean, right? Never say never. Who knows, right? Is it plausible that we might ultimately choose to install this data center equipment that we already have somehow between, Scrubgrass and Panther Creek? Because if we're presumably at about 130 megawatts of electrical usage when we are using all of our Bitcoin mining machines, and we have 25 extra megawatts of end-to-end data center capacity, when you do the math, that brings you up to, I believe, help me with the math here, but I think, right, if we add 25 megawatts to 130, right, 40, 50, 50, so what, like 155 megawatts of then, Bitcoin mining capabilities, so to speak. That's about 10 megawatts below and by the way, the reason I'm vacillating with the math, I just came in from a very, very lengthy and very challenging mountain bike ride, and which is phenomenal for one's mental health and emotional health. I would encourage you to, get some exercise. If you, like many of us, right, are kind of sometimes perturbed by, be it world events or events pertaining to Stronghold Digital Mining, it's a great way to relax. But anyway, so my brain's sort of a little bit in that high, that foggy high from having been on a ride. But yeah, so if we're at 155 megawatts of usage, well that still leaves us with about 10 megawatts of spare. Presumably spare capacity, right, that we can then still be connected to the grid. Because bear in mind, when PJM electrical grid prices are favorable, we're going to divert all the electricity that we're creating at Panther Creek and Scrubgrass to the grid, right? Depending on what's going on in each specific zone of the grid. So, is it plausible that we'll end up sort of like co-locating this equipment in-house? I don't get the impression that that's the game plan, but mathematically it would seem to at least be a potential option. So that's that's a very big unknown. Talon Energy, which had been a part of PP&L, which is the not only the zone of the grid that I happen to live in, but that also is a reference to the utility company that essentially operates all of the power lines in this portion of Pennsylvania and a couple other places. But, this entity called Talon Energy had previously been PP&L's like generation side, right? That, whereas now it's just purely distribution through the electrical wires. PP&L previously did have this, generation capacity, which they ultimately spun off into something called Talon Energy. Interestingly, Talon Energy was ultimately acquired, I believe, by Riverstone Holdings. Now, I hope I'm getting the name of that hedge fund or private equity fund correct, but I believe it's Riverstone. And what's intriguing about this is that another publicly traded Bitcoin mining company called TerraWolf, if I'm getting the name correct here, they, to the best of my very limited understanding, because remember, I only have really time to focus on Stronghold Digital Mining for the most part, but in my limited understanding, they struck an arrangement with, basically Talon Energy, a subsidiary now of Riverstone, to create a crypto mine at a nuclear power plant in Luzerne County, if my understanding is correct. And so they have a power purchase agreement with that nuclear power plant, and that is where they have some equipment, Bitcoin mining equipment. So is it plausible that a company like Stronghold Digital Mining could potentially tap into something like that as well? I'm not sure. Is there some exclusivity that exists between, Riverstone and TerraWolf? Maybe. Or maybe it's just a matter of somebody showing up at Riverstone's door saying, hey, we're interested in parking some data center equipment at one of your nuclear power plants, and we'd like to strike an arrangement whereby we can make that happen. I'm only tossing that out there because you can kind of get two things done at the same time, right? We could then plausibly say, hey, Stronghold Digital Mining, in addition to doing like legitimately incredible like environmental like work in terms of waste coal, we're also making an effort to be carbon neutral, and as an intermediate step until we can get, presumably, hopefully get, some carbon capture and sequestration technology in place, and maybe start doing something with the carbon that's coming out of our, waste coal reclamation facilities. Until then, hey, we're going to try to co-locate this data center equipment at a facility, at an energy facility that releases no carbon dioxide whatsoever. And that, of course, would be true with a nuclear power plant. With that, in terms of the checkbox, right? Hey, how are these guys doing on environmental issues? I mean, from my perspective, we're doing really well on environmental issues, but, kind of the prevailing, sort of like I think the in terms of a popularity contest, I think, waste coal remediation is pretty low on that list. I think being able to say, hey, you know what, we get our electricity from a completely carbon-free source of power, which in the case of, for example, a Riverstone-owned nuclear power plant, it's a very strong argument to be made. Hey, there's literally no carbon dioxide being, released from this facility. Would that potentially help attract additional investment capital to Stronghold Digital Mining? Because then we'd be kind of a little bit more, again, using that checkbox analogy. Hey, you know what? We're checking the box that we've got like a carbon-free source of power, So these are all things that are going to be answered very, very soon, right? Because the thinking is we're going to find out where this equipment's going to be placed by pretty much the end of this month, maybe the very beginning of October. Remember, these are very complex issues. I have tremendous respect for Greg and Matt and everybody else at Stronghold who's trying to figure out where to put this equipment, how to get Bitcoin mining machines in there, and how do we start, mining for Bitcoin relatively soon so that we can start showing some results from it. So these are all things that are on my mind as we begin this week. In the meantime, as always, look, hey, let's just stay positive, because there's really no value to being negative. I mean, I could get on here every single day and complain about the Bitcoin global hash rate being out of control, right? I could complain about all kinds of macroeconomic issues that are likely to severely affect the United States. I can talk about, legislative body dysfunction in this guy, right? There's a whole litany of things that we can kind of focus on that are nothing but negative. But that's, we have to, as an organization, right? And I truly believe that Stronghold Digital Mining does this, right? We're a very solution-focused organization, right? We can't be focused on the problem. We got to focus on the solution, and constantly moving forward and trying to find the best way forward to not only do right by the environment, but also to do right by everybody who works at the company, and of course to do right by the stakeholders, which are, again, including the people who work there, local communities, but of course those of us who are co-owners of the business, or, shareholders of the business, to do right by us as well. It's a very tricky and oftentimes, I think, challenging balancing act, but I'm convinced and really, really confident that the company is attempting to do that every single day. So let's stay positive, let's be great, and we're going to see each other again tomorrow.